My wife cheated with my boss while I worked overtime, so I took back everything, and she realized too late who had the power. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and for a long time, I convinced myself that love meant sacrifice, even when my body felt like it was being slowly ground down by overtime shifts and sleepless nights. Every morning, I left before the sun came up, the hallway smelling faintly of stale coffee and laundry detergent. And every night, I came home when the house was dark and silent, believing I was doing this for us. I kept telling myself, "You're building something stable, something real," as I pushed for promotions and bonuses, imagining the life we would finally enjoy together. She'd smile at family dinners and say, "He works so hard for us. I'm so proud." And I'd feel a quiet, bruised kind of pride settle into my chest. But when the door closed and it was just us, her warmth faded into distant politeness, like I was a roommate she tolerated instead of a husband she loved. There were tiny moments I ignored because trusting her felt safer than questioning her. Her phone was always face down now, screen locked tight, and if it buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly and say, "It's just work. Don't worry." When I tried to kiss her after 12-hour shifts, she'd gently pull away, murmuring, "I'm just exhausted, okay?" Her voice sounded calm, but the air between us felt heavy and unfamiliar. I started noticing how she'd go quiet whenever I talked about my schedule or upcoming projects, her eyes drifting away like she wasn't really hearing me. One night, I overheard her whispering in the kitchen, her tone soft and almost playful. And when I asked who she was talking to, she smiled too brightly and said, "No one. You're imagining things." I laughed it off, but something inside me twisted. A subtle warning bell I chose to silence. I kept telling myself that loyalty meant trusting without doubt, even as the coldness between us grew thicker, even as the space in our bed felt wider than it ever had before. And as I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that our silence was hiding something far more dangerous than either of us was ready to admit. The changes in her didn't happen all at once. They crept in like hairline fractures spreading through glass. Suddenly, work dinners started popping up at the last minute, and she'd say, "Don't wait up, it might be late." Already halfway out the door with a nervous smile. I told myself it was normal, that ambitious people had busy lives, but the house felt colder every time her heels clicked away down the hallway. I remember standing by the sink one evening, listening to her soft laughter carry from the bedroom, a tone so gentle and intimate, it barely sounded like her. When I asked who she was talking to, she cleared her throat and said, "Just a colleague. You're overthinking." Again. And the way she avoided my eyes made my chest tighten. Around the same time, my boss started acting strangely attentive. He clapped my shoulder and said, "You're one of our most reliable guys. You know that?" Then added casually, "So, you don't mind taking extra shifts, right? No major obligations at home?" I laughed awkwardly and replied, "No, sir. Whatever the company needs." But something about the question lingered uncomfortably in my mind. It felt invasive, like he was measuring the distance between my life and my marriage. Still, I reasoned that he was making conversation, and I buried the uneasy thought under another long week of exhaustion. At home, she began scrolling through luxury furniture catalogs and whispering excitedly about designer handbags. "Don't you think I deserve something nice after everything?" she asked, her eyes shining with a hunger I didn't recognize. I nodded automatically, even as a panic stirred in me, wondering how her taste had escalated so fast. My loyalty clung stubbornly to the idea that stress was changing her, that we'd find our way back. But as she drifted further from me, and as my boss watched me a little too closely, the gap between what I believed and what I felt started to widen, and I couldn't tell whether I was protecting our love or slowly ignoring the truth waiting to surface. It happened so casually that at first, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Her phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower, and a text preview flashed across the screen. "You still owe me for that coffee incident," followed by a laughing emoji that twisted something sharp inside my chest. That joke wasn't ours. It wasn't anything we'd ever shared. I stood there frozen, heart thudding so loudly, it felt like it might echo through the tiled walls, replaying every strange moment from the past few weeks in a sudden, terrifying clarity. The late nights, the softened voice, the guarded smiles, they all lined up too perfectly now. When she walked back in, steam clinging to her skin and the scent of her familiar shampoo filling the air, I forced my voice to stay steady. "Who's texting you about a coffee incident?" I asked, trying to sound casual even as my palms dampened. She barely paused, picking up the phone and glancing at it before offering a small, charming laugh. "Oh, that? Just someone from work joking around. You're reading way too much into it," she said, brushing past me and touching my arm lightly, like affection could erase the knot forming in my stomach. Her warmth felt rehearsed, calculated, almost comforting in a way that made me feel foolish for doubting her. I nodded, swallowing the questions clawing at my throat, and told myself not to cause a scene. Inside, though, my mind spiraled relentlessly. I began noticing every movement, every shift in her tone, every glance toward her phone. I listened more closely to the way she spoke when she stepped outside to take calls. I watched her expressions change when certain names popped up on her screen. I stopped confronting and started observing, a silent witness to a reality I wasn't ready to face. The house felt heavier at night now, every shadow stretching longer, every silence sharper. I'd lie awake beside her, staring into the darkness, wondering who that text was really from, and how long this hidden world had existed right under my nose. I never meant to follow her that evening, but something inside me refused to stay quiet when she claimed she was meeting a coworker for a quick drink. I kept my distance as I watched her step out of a dimly lit restaurant restroom and walk toward the front, my heart pounding harder with every step I took behind her. Then I saw him, my boss, standing just a little too close, his hand brushing her lower back as if it already belonged there. They didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in their hushed laughter and lingering eye contact, the kind that carried history, not professionalism. In that moment, the world around me blurred, replaced by a ringing in my ears and the sickening realization that this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't harmless. This was something intimate unfolding right in front of me. When she finally noticed me, her smile faltered for just a second before she forced it back into place. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice tight, eyes flicking nervously between me and him. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "I could ask you the same thing." My boss cleared his throat and muttered something about running into her by accident, but the way his fingers lingered told a different story. On the drive home, she twisted the narrative effortlessly. "You're being paranoid," she snapped. "You've been stressed and insecure lately, and now you're imagining things. It's embarrassing." Her words dug deep, dragging confusion and humiliation along with them. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I nodded weakly, pretending the image of them together wasn't burned into my mind. But that night, as she slept peacefully beside me, a cold clarity settled in. I began screenshotting messages, noting times she left, tracking every unexplained change. I wasn't ready to accept the truth yet, but part of me knew the ground had shifted beneath my feet. And as I scrolled through my phone in the quiet darkness, documenting what I used to trust, I realized something had already broken beyond repair. I wasn't even searching for the truth when it finally tore itself open. She'd left her tablet unlocked on the couch while she showered, and the glow of the screen caught my eye like a quiet invitation I didn't want, but couldn't refuse. A message thread was already open, her name and my boss's name sitting there together, like a cruel punch to the chest. My fingers trembled as I scrolled, each line more devastating than the last. Explicit photos, late-night promises, inside jokes. Plans for weekends she told me were girls' nights or mandatory team bonding. My vision blurred as I read, realizing this wasn't recent. This was a long, calculated affair, hiding in plain sight, while I worked myself into exhaustion for a future that didn't exist. When she stepped into the living room, wrapped in her towel, my voice barely sounded like my own. "How long?" I whispered, holding the tablet up between us, like evidence at a silent trial. Her face drained of color, but instead of immediate honesty, she sighed, rubbed her temples, and said, "It's not what you think. I was just lonely. You're never here." The words felt like knives, sharp and absurd. She admitted to seeing him, but every confession came wrapped in minimization. "It didn't mean anything. I was vulnerable. You've been so distant," she murmured, as if rewriting reality would soften the blow. Then she let something slip that chilled me to the core. She mentioned how he'd always known when I'd stay late, how he'd made sure our schedules never aligned. That's when it clicked. The sudden overtime, the forced shifts, the way my boss kept asking about my availability at home. He'd been isolating me, carving distance between my own wife and me so they could exist unrestricted in the space he created. Every exhausted night, every missed dinner, every quiet argument suddenly twisted into a new, unforgiving meaning. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the heavy silence, feeling something inside me go cold and still. The man who once loved without question disappeared, replaced by a quiet, burning resolve that frightened even me. Something in me went eerily quiet after everything came out, like the storm had ripped through and left behind a strange, frozen calm. I expected fury, screaming, shattered furniture, but instead, I felt a deliberate stillness settle over my thoughts, sharp and focused. When she tried to keep talking, to justify and soften the truth she'd already poisoned, I simply nodded and said, "I need some space." My voice so even it almost scared me. Inside, though, my heart was hardening into something precise and unmovable. She seemed to interpret my silence as weakness. "You're not seriously going to throw everything away over a mistake, are you?" she asked one night, flipping her hair as if I was being dramatic. I watched her carefully, noting how quickly she slipped back into casual confidence, how openly she still texted him in front of me like I was invisible. Every small act of disrespect only sharpened my resolve. I stopped pleading. I stopped explaining. I started planning. Late at night, while she slept peacefully beside me, I researched legal advice, whispered consultations, and financial safeguards. My laptop screen illuminated the dark room as phrases like asset protection and separation agreements filled my vision. I rerouted direct deposits, opened a private account, and began quietly shifting control of anything tied to my name. I could feel the power slowly sliding back into my hands, every calculated move restoring a sliver of dignity she'd stripped away. Meanwhile, she carried on like nothing had truly changed. "He understands me in ways you never did," she said casually once, not even bothering to lower her voice. The words should have shattered me, but instead, they felt like confirmation, fuel for the meticulous exit forming in my mind. The hurt was still there, raw and aching, but it was being reshaped into something colder, something controlled. I looked at her across the living room, the same woman I'd once adored, and realized she had no idea what was quietly unfolding beneath her sense of superiority. She thought she still had the upper hand, that I would fold, forgive, stay. But every silent step I took was shifting the ground under her feet, and as I deleted another shared account and watched the numbers reflect only my control, a calm sense of inevitability settled over me. The night I realized just how deeply they'd both broken me, the apartment felt suffocating, like even the walls had turned against me. She sat across from me on the couch, laughing softly into her phone, and when I asked what was so funny, she didn't even look up. "Oh, I was just telling him how my husband basically lives at the office. He's like a ghost roommate at this point," she said, with a careless smirk. The casual cruelty of it sliced through me, sharper than any argument we'd ever had. In that moment, the truth settled heavy in my chest. My marriage hadn't just failed. It had been used, drained, and discarded. At work, the final humiliation came like a slow-motion collapse. My boss called me into his office, leaning back in his chair with an air of cold authority. "Your performance has been slipping," he said, tapping a pen against a folder. "I'm moving you to a lower responsibility role for now. Less pay, less pressure." I stared at him in disbelief, knowing full well I'd been carrying the weight of double shifts for months. "This isn't fair," I whispered, but he only shrugged. "Company decision." The message was clear. I was expendable. By the time I trudged home, my hands were shaking, and my reflection in the hallway mirror looked hollow, unrecognizable. I sank onto the edge of the bed, while she scrolled through photos of vacations they joked about taking together. "You really should have tried harder," she muttered, without cruelty or kindness, just indifference. That indifference hurt more than anger ever could. I felt my sense of self collapse inward, every ounce of confidence dissolving into quiet self-loathing. Alone in the bathroom later, staring at my bloodshot eyes, a single thought echoed relentlessly. Was I ever enough? The silence in that room grew heavy, almost suffocating, as if everything I built had crumbled into dust beneath my feet. And standing there, on the edge of everything I'd lost, I felt a strange stillness settle in, the kind that comes right before something breaks completely. The shift didn't look dramatic from the outside, but inside me, something lethal had unlocked. I started waking before dawn with a clarity so sharp it almost hurt, each breath feeling measured, intentional. My dining table turned into a war room. Folders, USB drives, screenshots, dates, timestamps, every late night, and whispered phone call cataloged with surgical precision. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was constructing something final. When the lawyer on the phone murmured, "You've gathered more than enough," I felt a strange calm settle through my spine, as if my heartbeat finally remembered its purpose. I submitted everything to corporate compliance under the sterile hum of fluorescent lights, my voice steady as I described manipulation, conflict of interest, retaliation. "This isn't personal," I said quietly to the HR rep, eyes burning but unblinking. "This is documented." They nodded, serious now, flipping through pages that carried the weight of my silence. My boss passed me in the hallway later, his expression flickering with confusion when he saw my name on an official inquiry notice. For the first time in months, he didn't smirk. He avoided my gaze. At home, she lounged confidently on the couch, legs crossed, phone pressed to her ear as she laughed. "He's finally stopped sulking," she joked to someone on the other end, believing I still sat broken in the corner of her world. When she noticed me watching, she raised a brow. "You okay? You've been weirdly quiet," she said, almost amused. I met her eyes and offered a small, unreadable smile. "I'm fine," I replied, and the simplicity of my tone made her pause, just for a second. Behind that calm exterior, everything was moving. Assets frozen, emails flagged, investigations launched. I felt control returning in measured waves, like the tide reclaiming a shore that had been stolen. My hands no longer shook, my voice no longer cracked. The pain had transformed into something steadier, colder, deliberate. As I watched her continue to underestimate the storm forming around her, I realized she still thought I was the defeated man she created. And for now, I was letting her believe it. I didn't expect the desperation to hit her so fast, but when it did, it came in waves that soaked the entire room. She stood in the doorway one evening, eyes rimmed red, voice trembling as she whispered, "Please, we can fix this. You're overreacting. You know I only acted out because I felt abandoned." Her hands reached for me like I was still something she owned, still someone she could pull back with a few fractured words. I watched her cry without moving, without the instinct to comfort that once defined me, and it was unsettling how calm I felt. "I never thought you'd actually do this," she sobbed, knees buckling as she sank onto the carpet. "I thought you'd forgive me like you always do." There it was, the confession hidden inside desperation. She had built her betrayal on the assumption that my weakness would save her. "You misunderstood loyalty," I said quietly. "You mistook it for permanence." My tone held no cruelty, no warmth, only distance, and that distance seemed to terrify her more than anger ever could. She tried to rewrite the past with trembling words. "It meant nothing, I swear. He was just an escape from how lonely I felt. I never stopped loving you," she pleaded, clutching at my sleeve, her tears staining the fabric. I gently removed her hand, the simplicity of the gesture speaking louder than any insult. "You stopped loving me the second you decided my pain was acceptable," I answered, and even I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Her expression fractured as the realization finally sank in. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't resentment I'd cooled down from. This was final. She whispered my name like a prayer as I stepped toward the door, but I didn't turn back. The power no longer lived in grand gestures or raised voices. It lived in my silence, in the certainty she could no longer reach. And as the door clicked softly shut behind me, I knew there was nothing left of the man she once controlled. Walking out that night felt less like loss and more like stepping into oxygen after years of suffocation. The air outside was cool, sharp against my skin, grounding me in a reality that finally belonged to me. Each step away from that apartment felt deliberate, as if I was reclaiming every sacrifice I'd ever made. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a strange clarity, a quiet awareness that I had survived something that nearly erased me. In the weeks that followed, my life shifted into unfamiliar peace. The silence of my new space no longer echoed with tension or whispered lies, only the soft hum of my own breathing and the steady rhythm of rebuilding. I resumed therapy, poured myself into routines that healed instead of drained, and rediscovered parts of myself I'd buried under obligation. For the first time in a long while, I looked in the mirror and recognized the man staring back. She tried to reach out once more, a final text that read, "I miss us. I miss you." I stared at it for a long time, before setting my phone face down on the table, letting the moment pass like distant thunder. She became a shadow of consequence, a lesson I no longer needed to carry. The need for revenge dissolved, replaced by something more powerful, peace. I began to redefine what strength meant, not as endurance of pain, but as the courage to walk away from it. My career slowly stabilized, my confidence returned in quiet waves, and the world began to feel less hostile, more open, more real. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't broken, I was free. And as I stood at my window one evening, watching the city breathe in soft amber light, I understood something with absolute clarity. The power had never truly left me. It had simply been waiting for tea.